we were doing research beforehand, of course, because we don't want to ask you questions that you've already answered before in other podcasts.
Sure.
Mashallah, you kind of been on a podcast tour. We saw you on the Not From Here podcast with the host, Brother Jaffa, over in Michigan, right?
Yeah.
And you also were on the After Maghrib show in UK, so international.
Mr. International.
Mr. International, indeed. And when you were on After Maghrib, there was a point where, like, I feel like, in a good way, you went off script. Like, I could see, like, you got, like, very passionate about the subject, and you were just kind of, like, they were letting you cook, basically. Like, you're getting really into it.
That's very kind of you.
And it was, like, when you were being asked about, like, you were just saying, like, what are we prioritizing? Because you're being asked about, like, you see youth in the community, parents would come to you, and they'll be like, oh, my kid now isn't praying. And you're looking at the situation, and it's like 14, 20 years, you had no Islamic priorities. And now the kid's coming to you now is like, I don't pray. It's like the issues began way before then.
Yeah, too late at this point, honestly.
It's like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
I guess if you could just speak on what you think it is in our communities that we're getting wrong in terms of education and just teaching Islam. What are we getting wrong with
education, prioritization?
Kind
of stuff,
yeah, I mean, I think I would rephrase the question and be like, what are we getting right? That's how many things we're getting wrong, honestly. Wow. Like, I would say probably the majority of what we're doing is probably not done properly. There are, of course, some things we're getting right, but I think there's, and I've had this conversation with a lot of our own community members, because when we started City of Knowledge, the question that came to mind was, well, we already have centers, so why are we starting a new one, right? And that's a very valid question, and a question that everyone who wants to start any organization needs to have a proper answer to. So the answer there for me was, well, the vision is very different here, okay? So I think there's at least these two elements come to my mind very easily. We'll make it three to add the last one. One thing is a matter of leadership, right? So priorities are going to come from leadership. If you don't have the right leadership, then you're not going to be able to set the right priorities, right? So that leadership has to have two elements at least. Is one, it has to be a person / group of people, whatever, an entity that understands the needs of the community. And that would primarily be the needs of our up-and-coming generations. So it has to be a leadership that even understands that. Okay, so in a lot of situations, it's not even the case. It's good intentions, but there is a lack of understanding because they may not be from this generation and a lot of other reasons, So that's one thing leadership needs to have. And the other thing that leadership needs to also have is a firm understanding of the faith, right? So if I'm running a clinic, I can't have someone who's not an expert run this clinic. I need a doctor in there, right? And what we've done in our masajid, in our centers, is usually the leader is not the person with the expertise. So there's a major issue there. So that's number one. And this is, by the way, none of this is like, rocket science.
Yeah, it's not novel.
These are like the basics, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to look at it in a much better way, like in the Sunni school of thought, right? You have to give them credit in terms of how they've been able to put together their organizations. And of course, every school of thought and every religion struggles with this issue, but I think you have a lot more successful examples to learn from. So that's leadership number one. Number two, our organizations, masajid, community centers, whatever you want to call them, they don't have welcoming environments. It's not the type of environment where I feel welcomed to attend. And it's not the type of place I feel like I want to connect with other people there. Sometimes there's not even an opportunity to connect with other people there, because you're like, okay, so what's the event? Nothing. It's just a lecture, and then everyone, goes home, for example, Okay, so where am I going to socialize? Where am I going to have a chance to sit with other people who are my peers, right? And, have a good time with them. Are we ever going to come to the masjid and just spend time and just chill here, right? And make this feel like our home, So a lot of those elements are missing. And number three is deeper Islamic knowledge. Our organizations typically are scratching the surface when it comes to Islamic knowledge. And this is the part where I get a little passionate. In today's day and age, that does not work. It does not work. The questions are too many. The challenges are too many. The, you want to call it shubahat or whatever, are too many. There's too many isms. And so you need to dedicate, that needs to be a priority. How do we answer this question? How do we address this? Now, for an organization, that means what type of speakers are we inviting? What type of time are we allocating to them? How much of our budget is going towards this? I mean, I'm speaking from a perspective of being in an organization and seeing there's all these details that goes into it. So yeah, this part, I mean, we have not even touched. You know, I gave the example a couple of weeks ago in Jummah Salat. It was the birth of Lady Fatima, salawatullahi salamu alayha, and I said it's not enough for us to sit back and say Lady Fatima was amazing. That's important. That's like 10% of what we need to do. And then there's another 90%. Well, how does that apply to me? What does her life mean for me? She got married at a younger age. What does that mean for today's world? What was her dress code like? What does that mean for today? What was her role in family? What does that mean? These are all different in today's day and age. So we have to have all these conversations, but typically we're only focused on basically saying the praises of these individuals. And that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. We're going to have a generation coming up that is, and by the way, my own generation was neglected in this way as well. But we have to prevent it for the next generation. We're going to have a generation that's going to come up, and religion is just going to be something on the side. You know, like, yeah, I'm Muslim, but like, not really.
I'm culturally Muslim.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening now. Like, I know.
40-day Muslim.
Yeah. I've met a lot of people. I was telling a story to Mahdi, actually, a coworker of mine. I found out he was Muslim after, spending time with him.
Yeah.
And seeing him not really practice. And then I found out he was Muslim because Ramadan came along and someone told me he was fasting. I was like, what?
Yeah, and to be 100% clear, there's nothing wrong if someone is in that position where they're only practicing certain elements of the faith. That's not a bad starting point. That's amazing, right? The point is, what is the organization supposed to do to deepen the faith of this person, or at least try to help them along this path?